Shalom and welcome to another Petachomel podcast from Bay Abidan, teaching Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews. It is Sunday, the 29th of June 2025, and I wish you all Shavuot Tov. We've just finished our Havdalah. Most Messianic Noahides will have just finished their Havdalah, at least those who are in this hemisphere, I suppose. There are those of you who haven't yet woken up, or maybe you finished your Havdalah already last night, but most of us, I should say, have just finished our Havdalah, and that means it's time to start the new week. So what is Havdalah? Havdalah is something which Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua min Nazaret, told his disciples to do in memory of him. And that is distinct from any other Rebbe who hasn't given such an ethical will to do in memory of him. When the Rebbes pass away or when they're about to leave us, they give us something to do in memory of them. That's called the Zava'ah. A Zava'ah is an ethical will. And by the Zava'ah, the disciples of that particular Rebbe are known. This is a practice in Hasidic Judaism. And so Messianic Noahides have a similar practice. We take the Zava'ah from our Rebbe, that is Yeshua min Nazaret, who told us to do Havdalah in memory of him, specifically Meleva Malka, which is a more complex version of Havdalah, where you also distribute Shirayim at a tish, which is at a table at the end of the Sabbath or the following morning. So today I'm going to explain to you more about what Messianic Noahides are and what Messianic Noahides believe and what distinguishes them from other kinds of believers. So Messianic Noahides obviously observe Noahide Judaism. And they observe Noahide Judaism as dictated by the scribal Pharisaical community. No other community is recognized as authoritative for Messianic Noahides. Noahide Judaism, as described by the Pharisaical community, is the only version which is valid. And of course, that's basically the 7 laws of Noah. Everybody knows that. That's in the Talmud. And you have individual Jewish rabbis who have popped up every now and then with different interpretations, saying, oh, there's more than that, there's 30 mitzvot, or there's this, that, the other. And that's okay, that's all right. But the general consensus is that there are 7 laws of Noah. And so Messianic Noahides follow the consensus, the general consensus. Noahide Judaism is a substrand within scribal Pharisaical Judaism. It is a doctrinal morality. It is not a praxis. So doctrinal morality means there's specific things you have to believe in doctrinal concept, in a doctrinal point of view, from a doctrinal point of view. And there's a certain morality which you're expected to uphold. But with regards to praxis, how you want to practice your religion, that's up to you. There's nobody's going to get interfering with that. And so, as a result, as far as praxis is concerned, Messianic Noahides can be members of any Messianic community. That means they can be Christian or Muslim or Messianic, from a Messianic synagogue, for example. It doesn't matter which group of people they want to fellowship with. The praxis is irrelevant. You can be from any kind of Christian or any kind of Muslim. The praxis is irrelevant. The important thing is the doctrine. As long as you are honest about the limitations of the communities in which you are fellowshipping or in which you exist, which you are forced to live in some cases, you don't have a choice. You have to be honest about the limitations of those communities. For example, any of those people, because they can never be considered totally safe from your point of view. You can't be considering yourself safe and sound with somebody who believes in supersessionism and displacement theology if that is their faith and they are strong believers in their faith, because when push comes to shove, you don't believe in that, and you'll be shoved out. So you've got to be aware of that situation. You can never completely gel with the community that you are fellowshipping with as far as praxis is concerned. And so for this reason, most Noahides practice at home. They don't join in with a church or a mosque or even a synagogue. They just practice at home. And that's called house churches. So that is the safest thing for you to do, unless, of course, you happen to live in a house full of people who are of a different faith, in which case your best option, to be honest, is to get out of that house. That's the reality of the situation, and try and find somewhere else to live, to be safe and free. And it is painful, of course, following any kind of religion which is out of step with the community that you belong to. But Messianic Noahides are interested in the truth. The truth will set you free. And the truth is that all of these religious communities are wrong. That's the simple fact of the matter. They are all wrong, except for the Messianic Noahide community, as described in today's show. Not because this is some kind of hegemony won't push on you and say this is the case, and you're not going to argue with it. In fact, right now I'll stick in the link to the studio for you to join me in the studio while I'm doing this live. If you're watching it when I'm as a recording later, then I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to see it live. But if you are watching it live, you can come and join me in the studio to push back on anything I have to say, because we're not pushing this point of view that the Messianic Noahide point of view on the Abrahamic faith is the only true, correct point of view because we are bigoted. We're pushing this point of view because it is the rational and logical truth. And all you need is to talk long enough to find where your issues are with that, and we can present the rational, logical truth. At the end of the day, you may say, well, it comes down to personal preference. That is true. If you decide personally, as your personal preference, to ignore the truth, you can do that anytime you want. But if you want to talk about the truth, then you need to be engaging with this presentation. So here we are. I'm going to put it, join me in the studio if you want to talk about this particular thing. It's there in the chat now. And so we'll continue and explain a little bit more about this. So you must reject every kind of supersessionism and displacement theology. And furthermore, although Messianic Noahides can self-identify as Hebrews, it's completely acceptable for any Messianic Noahide to identify as a Hebrew, they must not call themselves Jews, while the scribal Pharisees do not consider them to be halakhic Jews. It doesn't matter if you have been thinking of yourself as a Jew. If the scribal Pharisees don't consider you to be a halakhic Jew, then you mustn't call yourself a Jew. So all Noahides are Edah Hebrews. Edah is the word, the old Hebrew word for church. That's how it was translated in the Gospel of Matthew, anyway. Edah was translated as church. And so all Noahides are considered to be Edah Hebrews, Hebrews of the church. But for us, a Jew must mean nothing other than Kehel Hebrews. So Noahides are not Kehel Hebrews. Kehel Hebrews are a kind of Edah Hebrew, and Noahides are also a kind of Edah Hebrew, but Noahides are not Kehel Hebrews. Kehel have very specific, or the Kehillah has very specific, and to use the Aramaic, it's funny to say the Kehillah, because Kehillah is actually already Aramaic with a definite article suffix ah. So when you're saying the Kehillah, it's like the Kehel, the. So I prefer to say the Kehel, but in English people say Kehillah already, so you might not understand what I'm saying if I don't make it clear. So the Kehel Hebrews have very specific ways of observing Judaism, which the rest of the Edah are not required to observe, should not even bother being trying to observe. The Kehel Hebrews primarily also are very concerned with yichus, something called yichus, and Edah Hebrews don't have to be concerned with yichus at all. Yichus is basically your lineage, your parental lineage, your line, your ancestral lineage, whereas Edda Hebrews are not necessarily even having any kind of Jewish ancestral lineage. They may just be Noahides who have come from completely non-Jewish, non-Hebrew background, and they've immediately adopted belief in Judaism, and so they are Noahides, but they haven't converted into Jews, so they don't have any yikus other than being Noahides. Okay, and if they did convert to Jews, their yikus would be ger, there are 10 kinds of yikus, which the Kehal Hebrews are very concerned about. So all Noahides are in the Edda of Hebrews, but for us, a Jew must be in the Kehal of Hebrews, not just in the Edda of Hebrews. They can't be Edda Hebrews only. They must also be Kehal Hebrews. And if they're not Kehal Hebrews, then they're not Jews, and they shouldn't call themselves Jews. For us, belief in Judaism is nothing but belief in traditional pre-Holocaust scribal Pharisaical Judaism. That's our definition of belief in Judaism. And if you believe in any other kind of Judaism, we would say you are in heresy. You do not believe in Judaism as it existed prior to the Holocaust. Your religion has been affected by the Holocaust. Therefore, you are not faithful to the religion as it was for 2,000 years beforehand. So it's very precise. You must be a believer in Judaism as it existed before the Holocaust, traditional pre-Holocaust scribal Pharisaical Judaism. That must be your religion. And you must not be a Jew. Okay? And anyone who believes in Judaism but doesn't have a scribal Pharisaical document of Jewishness can be considered a Noahide, but is not considered a Jew. If you do not have a scribal Pharisaical document of Jewishness, a letter from a scribal Pharisaical rabbi saying this person is a Jew, okay, if you don't have such a document from a recognized scribal Pharisaical Beit Din, okay, or a rabbi who represents such a Beit Din, or a rabbi who is in good standing with such a Beit Din, you are not a Jew. You should not consider yourself a Jew unless they have approved your status. You shouldn't go around calling yourself a Jew, even if you say, well, my mother was a Jew and she was recognized as scribal Pharisaical Judaism. This is how you have to prove it. First of all, you have to have a document concerning your mother from the Pharisaical Jewish, scribal Pharisaical Judaic community, a document confirming her as a religious Orthodox observant Jew. And then you have to have a document proving that you are her child. Then if you have these two documents together, you are considered by extension Jew according to scribal Pharisaical documentation. That would be acceptable. If you are the child of a person who has been proven to be the child of a scribe of a Jew who has a document according to scribal Pharisaical tradition, if that woman has a document, her child is a proven child of her. They have birth certificates and marriage certificates and everything which prove that that child is her child, even if that child is not a religious observant Jew. And you are the child of that child, and you can prove that you're the child of that child, specifically girl, you're the child of that daughter, and you have a document to prove that you are the child of that daughter. Then you again, by extension, have scribal Pharisaical documentation proving that you are a Jew as well, because your grandmother has documentation from the scribal Pharisaical authorities. Your mother has a birth certificate and possibly marriage certificates proving that she is the daughter of that woman. And you have documents, say birth certificate and marriage certificates, proving that you are the daughter of your mother. And then therefore also you are a Jew as well. That makes you into the third generation. But after the third generation, it doesn't matter if you can prove you are the child, you are not a Jew by extension at all. And you'll have to go through conversion if you wanted to be a Jew. But why bother? You can be a Noahide, and as a Noahide can achieve a level of holiness equal to the high priest in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. Okay, and that is something which is a level of holiness which only very few Jews have access to, or have had access to, throughout the whole history of Judaism. Why would you give up the opportunity to have the same level of holiness unless you really had no idea what Judaism was all about? If you had not a clue about Jewishness or Judaism, you might want to go through a conversion to become a Jew and miss out on that opportunity. But if you really had a clue, you would not go through conversion to become a Jew. You would be happy to believe in Judaism as a Noahide because you already have access to that simply by believing in Judaism as a Noahide without having to go through any special rituals or process. So it's a very, very important thing to understand the nature of Judaism. Don't call yourself a Jew, even if your grandparents, great-grandparents were Jews, unless you've got all the documentation to prove it, because if you don't have all the documentation to prove it, then you're not going to get any of the scribal Pharisaical authorities to issue you a document stating this person is a Jew, unless they have witnessed you going through a conversion under their authorities. So, as in to become a Jew under their Beit Din. So don't think about it. Because those who say that they are Jews when they are not, for the Messianic Noahides, those who say that they are Jews when they are not, are the synagogue of Satan. That is very, very clear for Messianic Noahides. Therefore, it's a very, very big no-no to go around calling yourself a Jew if you don't have authority, if you haven't got documentation to prove it from the recognized authorities. And the recognized authorities are the scribal Pharisees, because Jesus of Nazareth himself appointed the scribal Pharisees as the authorities in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 23, verses 1 to 3. That's where he made it absolutely clear. Those are the only authorities, earthly authorities, for his community. He appointed them. It's not Peter, you shall be a rock, and upon this rock I shall build my church, because the building still has to be under the authority of someone else. And Jesus appointed the authorities in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 23 when he said the scribes and the Pharisees, they sit in the seat of Moses, so do and observe everything they tell you to do. He did not say, do and observe everything that Peter tells you to do at all whatsoever. He never said that. In fact, he said, get behind me, Peter. Get behind me, Satan, several times to Peter. Peter was a betrayer, and Jesus had to sort of ask him, do you love me 3 times in order to undo Peter's betrayal of Jesus 3 times. So don't be following the wrong authorities. They are not authorities. They are the rock upon which he built his Eddah. That means they are the kind of Jew upon which he's going to build his Eddah. People who believe that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah, even though they haven't got reason to believe so. Because Jesus said to Peter, when he appointed Peter as this rock, he said, human eyes have not revealed this to you. Peter said to him, I say that you are the Messiah, the son of David. And Jesus said, human eyes have not revealed this to you. It's not possible to see that with human eyes, because I haven't done anything which indicates that I am the Messiah ben David. If I was Messiah ben David, then the world would be, everybody was singing, holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and it would be heaven on earth. Since I haven't done that, your belief that I am the Messiah ben David has to be a revelation from God the Father, because human eyes could not have revealed this to you. And he says, therefore, I say that you are a rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. So upon this kind of stone, I will build my church. And upon this kind of faith, people who believe that he will come as the Messiah ben David, then he will build his church. So if you believe that he's going to come as Messiah ben David one day, then you are the rock upon which he builds his church, just like Peter was. Anybody who believes that he's Messiah ben David, who will come, or he will come again as Messiah ben David, then this is a revelation. If you have a conviction about this, it's a revelation from the Father. You have a spirit of prophecy, and therefore you are the rock upon which he builds his church. And that doesn't give you authority. You don't have authority. The authority comes from Jesus' mouth when he says, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses and do everything they tell you to do. They are the authority appointed by Jesus. for his rock, for his Peters, because he says this to his disciples, to the apostles, and to the Erev Rav, to the crowd. For the crowd and for Jesus' apostles, which includes Simon Peter, the scribal Pharisees are the authority for his church. That's absolutely, totally clear. So, since they are the authority, only they have the right to dictate who is and who isn't a Jew. You don't have the right to call yourself a Jew unless the scribal Pharisaical authorities have given you documentation to say that you are a Jew. Let's be absolutely clear about that. If you don't, but you still love Jesus and you still believe he is a Messiah and you still love Judaism and you still love the Jews and you still want to follow the religion as described in the Bible, which is the only named religion in the Bible is Judaism. That's the only religion named in the Bible. It's actually named in the New Testament. And you say, clearly, this is the religion of the Bible. This has to be my religion too. Then you can be a Noahide. And every Noahide can always self-identify as a Hebrew, but not a Jew. All Jews are Hebrews, but not all Hebrews are Jews. All believers in the Abrahamic faith are Hebrews because they're part of Abraham's family, his spiritual children, if you like. And Abraham himself is called a Hebrew. So all the spiritual children of Abraham are spiritual Hebrews. They are automatically Hebrews, okay? Even if you have no Hebrew blood, no Jewish blood at all, no Jewish ancestry, no Jewish DNA, it doesn't matter, you're all equally Hebrews as soon as you become Messianic Noahides, because you believe that Jesus of Nazareth is your Lord, you accept him as the Lord of the Sabbath, and you have entered into his kingdom, the Sabbath kingdom. And therefore you are his subjects, and his subjects are Hebrews. So there is no longer any Greek or Scythian, and we don't care if you're calling yourself a Jew either. If you've got documentation that proves you're a Jew, it's not important to us. The only important thing is that you're also a Hebrew. So there's no Greek, there's no Jew, there's only Hebrews. Hebrew is the only thing. We're all united together as Hebrews. Now the problem is people think Hebrew means Jew. That's the problem with a lot of people. And so in their minds, if you identify as a Hebrew, people may think that you're saying you're a Jew. For this reason, and only for this reason, we identify as Noahides instead. So you should identify as Noahides instead of as Hebrews, unless you have the documentation to prove it from the scribal Pharisees. But amongst ourselves, there's nothing wrong with calling yourself Hebrews to other people who understand. If they understand that all the children of Abraham are Hebrews, whether Ishmaelite, children of Jacob, or children of Esau, if they understand that all of these are Hebrews, and all the children of Hagar are Hebrews, then you can call yourself Hebrew to them. But if they don't understand that and they think Hebrew means Jew, then best to just call yourself Noahide to them. For their sake, we will change the way we refer to ourselves, either as Hebrews or Noahides, depending on the level of knowledge of the person we are talking to. That's how we have to do it. We have to discern the spirits carefully. We have to get very careful so that we don't cause confusion. And we don't bring a bad name to the scribal Pharisaical authorities. If by our behavior people say, oh, that person's a Jew, they're behaving so badly, and they have a bad thoughts, bad opinion of scribal Pharisees because of thinking that we are scribal Pharisaical authorities, Jews. Okay, so that's very, very important line in the sand that we have to draw and make sure we don't cross those lines. So belief in Judaism has to be, meaning belief in pre-Holocaust scribal Pharisaical Judaism, and anyone who believes in Judaism but doesn't have a scribal Pharisaical document of Jewishness is considered a Noahide. Now, conversely, anyone, regardless of whether they believe in Judaism or not, but who does have scribal Pharisaical documentation of Jewishness, is a Jew and not a Noahide. We are all Hebrews, but those ones are Jews, not Noahides. And I described to you exactly how. For example, if they have proof that they are the child of a girl who is the daughter of a girl who was the daughter of a religious observant Orthodox Jew who has scribal Pharisaical documentation, then that person is a Jew even if they don't believe anything in Judaism. And then they become of interest to us. If they do not believe in Judaism, they become of interest to us because they are fitting the category of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They are Esau. And we, the Noahides, exist specifically to help the Messiah shepherd such people back into the pen of Orthodox Judaism. They have to be shepherded back into the pen, into the sheep pen. That's why Noahides exist. They exist to work with the Messiah to do that job. The Messiah works through such people to do that job. A perfect example of a Noahide through whom the Messiah worked to bring the lost sheep of the house of Israel back into the sheep pen was Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was a Noahide, and the Messiah worked through him to bring the children of Israel back into the Holy Land and help them establish a temple where they worship, for example. That is the work which was done at that time. And that's a foreshadow of what Noahides will be doing in the future. Of course, not doing it with the land of Israel and to try and rebuild a temple on Temple Mount, etc. Not like that, because there is a spiritual kingdom that the Jews now have to come into, and that is to the Olam Haba. And that means the Noahide has a spiritual job to try and help those lost Jews into Olam Haba. It's your duty to try and help them get to Olam Haba, a place in the world to come. That is the true land of Israel, the true promised land, which the Noahides have a duty to try and help them return to. Specifically, that place can be gained by them if they are observing the Sabbath. So in other words, the duty of the Noahide, who is going to be working with the Messiah as the shepherd, to shepherd those lost sheep back into the house of Israel, back into the sheep pen, if you like. The duty is to encourage those lost Jews to observe Sabbath. That's what we have to do. And if they turn on their heels, then at least you did your duty. You did what you had to do. So that is why Noahides exist. They exist specifically for this mission. Hence, Jesus of Nazareth said, I have not come except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So go and baptize all nations in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Make disciples out of all nations in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So what he's saying here is, in order to do this job of retrieving the lost sheep of the house of Israel, we need Talmidim, disciples from all nations. There is no other way to do that except from with an army of disciples from all nations, except with Noahides. That is how the Messiah works. He works through the Noahides. It took a while, even though after Jesus had said this to them clearly, it took a while for his disciples to work this out. But in the book of Acts, they worked out in chapter 15, they realized this is what's got to happen. This is what's got to be done. We have to promote Noahide Judaism. That's how it's going to work out. And that is what we continue to do today. So those people who have scribal Pharisaical documentation of Jewishness, which means they can prove through documentation, through legal documentation, that they are the child of a woman who was the daughter of a woman who was the daughter of a Jew, a woman who was recognized as a scribal Pharisaical, with scribal Pharisaical documentation as a Jew, but they don't like Judaism. Those are the ones that we are trying to encourage to observe the Sabbath. That's what the Noahides have to do. And we can encourage them to observe the Sabbath by starting to abstain from work on the Sabbath ourselves. No manner of servile work. We do not allow anybody to do any manner of servile work for us on the Sabbath, and we don't do any manner of servile work for them on the Sabbath. We can do voluntary work on the Sabbath, to volunteer for community work on the Sabbath. Not volunteering for a slave master or an employer. Absolutely not. But we can do voluntary work for the community on a Sabbath. That is acceptable. In fact, in the Soviet times, in the Soviet Union, people who did voluntary work for the community on the Sabbath were called subotniks, which means Sabbathists. And that was a continuation of the subotniks who existed before the Soviet times, who observed a holy Sabbath, doing no manner of servile work, only voluntary work, for example, on a Sabbath, but not allowing anybody to do any servile work for them, and not doing any servile work for anybody else, but to do acts of love voluntarily. That is acceptable, without payment, without thought of payment, without hope of payment. That's acceptable. And to keep a kosher and holy Sabbath, of course, if you are interested in Noahide Judaism. Still, as mentioned above, in praxis, I should say, as mentioned before, in praxis, Messianic Noahide can be an Orthodox Messianic, an Orthodox Christian, a Catholic, a Protestant, a Calvinist, a Lutheran, evangelical, or even attending Messianic Jewish synagogues, as I've said before. They can even be Muslims. They can be Shiites. They can be Sunnis. They can be Alevis. They can be Ishmaelis. They can be any kind of believer that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah, as long as they keep the Sheva Mitzvot, the 7 laws of Noah, which is what makes them a Noahide, and believe that Magdalena's teacher, the New Testament Rabbi Jesus of Nazareth, is their own personal Messiah, while rejecting Magdalena's son, who is the Baraita's Yeshu Notzri, rejecting him as the 666, the 666 mark of the beast. Okay, that's the one they have to reject. As long as you reject Yeshu Notzri as 666, Magdalena's son as 666, you reject him as the 666, and you observe Magdalena's teacher as your own personal Messiah, and you keep the 7 laws of Noah, you are already in the Messianic Noahide group. You've made it. You've passed. Okay, that's fundamental. But you may still be a bad Messianic Noahide. It's also possible to believe that Jesus of Nazareth was actually a specific appearance of Sar Hapanim in a suffering servant role, only to make disciples, Talmidim, among the nations for this mission to save the remnant of Edom, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, Esau, the archetypal lost sheep, the archetypal prodigal son. The remnant of Edom is mentioned in Acts 15. They call him the remnant of man. So you can believe that Jesus of Nazareth was actually a specific appearance of Sar Hapanim for this role. And that is actually what makes you into the Edah of Jesus when he says, upon this rock I will build my church. Because as soon as you recognize Jesus of Nazareth as an appearance and you say, well, I personally believe that he wasn't just a guy, not just a human teacher who is my personal Messiah, but he was actually an appearance of Sar Hapanim in the suffering servant role, specifically coming to make disciples among all the nations for his mission to save the lost sheep of the house of Israel. If you believe that, then you are the rock upon which he wants to build his Edah, and you belong with us in that Edah. I don't know how many people out there are like that, but it seems like most people have a very shallow faith in Jesus. They don't have a serious belief in Jesus. They don't really want to understand him, who he was, why he came as a Jew, why he appeared at that particular time, why he did the things he did, why he said the things he said. What was the halakha that made him so successful and made the scribes and the Pharisees unable to defeat him? People who don't know anything about that with Jesus, they don't love Jesus. They just are looking for a brand name or something. They just have a lip service to him. But those of you who really want to know all about him, all those answers, then you will find that what I'm saying is absolutely 100% completely true. This is exactly the fact of the matter. This is what's happened. And you'll want to be part of this Edah. Now, I should say that in many ways, the Messianic Noahide doctrines are like Fisherite Anabaptism. And that means that if you are a Fisherite Anabaptist, congratulations, you might actually be in one of the only Christian groups who are considered perfect Messianic Noahides according to scribal Pharisaical doctrine. There's actually kind of a funny joke about that when in the movie The Frisco Kid with Gene Wilder, he comes across a group of Anabaptists and he thinks that they're Orthodox Jews. He spends a little bit of time with them and he is very, very grateful to them, and he says you'll always remember his time with them. So that's a kind of an indication that that kind of Christian, from the Orthodox Jewish point of view, is doing okay. They're doing it right, and they don't need any guidance. They've got it all sorted. They don't need to listen to this channel even. They've got it all sorted out. They know what they're doing. They're on the right tracks. As for the rest of the people out there who call themselves Christians, whether even Messianic Jews or Muslims who believe that Jesus of Nazareth is Messiah, they've got some serious problems and they need to sort it out. That's why this channel exists. It exists for those. So now we advise those of you who think, all right, I'm going to grab on to Judaism then. I'm going to go full steam ahead on Judaism. Those of you who want to practice a Judaic praxis, they want a Judaic praxis, we advise you that you accept the Orthodox Judaic teaching then, that there are some elements of Orthodox Judaism which are prohibited to Noahides. Prohibited. Noahides, for example, must be ready to eat trefa, which is donated to us by Orthodox Jews. There's a Torah command about this, that when a Jew, that is for us the Kehal, comes across some meat which is trefa, that they can give it, donate it freely to a Noahide, or they can sell it to a pagan, a Nachri. They can sell it to a pagan, or they can give it to a Noahide, give it to a ger, or sell it to a Nachri. So you must be prepared to accept such a gift when it's given to you. That's number one. Now, trefa simply means something which is not glatt kosher. Glatt kosher is what the scribal Pharisees eat. And if it's not glatt kosher, then it's considered trefa. And that means somebody who is a scribal Pharisee who has received a gift from somebody, for example, which is kosher meat, but that kosher meat was not glatt kosher, then that scribal Pharisee has two options. One, to give it to a Noahide. They're not supposed to throw it away. They're actually prohibited from that. They would have to give it as a gift to a Noahide, to ger, or they can sell it on to a Nachri. Okay? So that's one of the two things they could do. So therefore, Noahides have to be prepared to eat trefa. They have to be able to eat this when it's given to us as a gift. Okay? And that means that if you can eat it at that time, then you can eat what's considered to be treif by Orthodox Jews at any other time. For example, a lot of Orthodox Jews say pork is treif, and Noahides can eat pork. You can eat pork, but it should be it should have been slaughtered correctly. It should have had the blood poured off. It could not be strangled meat, for example. It has to be slaughtered meat. It can't be strangled. Another thing, whether a Noahide is already circumcised or uncircumcised, Noahides must not seek milah or hatafat dambrit. Okay, if you are circumcised or not, and you're a Noahide, you should not seek milah. If you're not circumcised, you might go and get a brit milah. No. And you shouldn't seek hatafat dambrit if you are circumcised. You don't go down that path. That's not for you. You stay as a Noahide. Unless the scribal Pharisees issue you a document saying that you are now a Jew, in which case you can go and get circumcised. You can go and have a milah. Sorry, if you're not circumcised, or if you have a circumcision already, you can go and get a hatafat dambrit, but you must not do so or seek it unless the scribal Pharisees invite you to do so. Okay? Otherwise, you do not do it. Also, Noahides do not wear tefillin. You do not wear phylacteries. That's very specific. You must not wear tefillin or phylacteries because it identifies you as a Jew. If you have some, then you can wear your phylacteries on a Saturday morning to distinguish you from Jews who do not wear them on Saturday mornings. They wear them on every other day of the week except Saturdays. So you might do that, but the best thing to do is don't waste your money. Don't get some. Okay, if you have a kosher pair, then give them to somebody who needs a kosher pair. Don't keep them for yourself. So Noahides do not wear phylacteries. They don't wear tefillin. Noahides do not wear tzitzit for the same reasons. Okay, because there's a prophecy that 10 people from each of the from the nations of the world will hold on to the tzitzit of he who is a Jew and say, we'll follow you for wherever you go because we've heard that God is with you. This refers to the Messianic Noahides holding on to the garment of Yeshua Minatzrat, Rabbi Jesus of Nazareth, and saying, we'll follow you wherever you go because we heard that God is with you. So that's why Noahides don't wear tzitzit. It's also because the scribal Pharisees say, don't do it. People will confuse you with being a Jew if you do. Also, Noahides do not take the seats closest to the bima in the synagogues. Neither do they take front seats at any Hag. A Hag is a festival. And Noahides must never be called rabbi, nor should they ever be called patera, patriarch. Perhaps you should also avoid patriotism as well, just to be on the safe side. So, besides these things which Noahides must not do to avoid the sins which are liable to come upon you if you do those things. And by the way, not being patriotic is another thing, because you could be a patriotic Jew in the Kehillah, but if you're patriotic and you're not in the Kehillah for any other nation, then that you are being a pagan, and that's why you have to be avoiding, national spirits. You must not worship national spirits. But there are also certain things that Messianic Noahides have to do, which other Noahides are not expected to do. For example, Messianic Noahides must only ever refer to Sar HaPanim as our Kathagit and director, as our master and director. Nobody else is our master, nobody else is our director. He is the only master, he is the only director. Noahide leadership is a diaconate of elders and other adults. It is not a group of overseers. The only oversight is provided by scribal Pharisaical Jews to make sure that we haven't left behind orthodoxy. We haven't fallen out of the folds of Orthodox Judaism, because Noahide Judaism is, as I said, a sub-branch of Orthodox Judaism. It's within the greater category of Orthodox Judaism. It's Orthodox Judaism for the nations, or it could be considered universal Orthodox Judaism. Noahide Judaism is in that category. So the leadership for Noahides is a diaconate, not any other kind. You have to be deacons and nothing else. Now, as I said, normally it would only include people not born to a Jewish mother. But if a Jewish Kehel or the state of Israel has refused you citizenship, despite producing all the documents, and you knowing you have a Jewish mother, for example, but you haven't got enough documents to satisfy either the Jewish Kehel, the scribal Pharisaical authorities, nor the state of Israel, even they haven't accepted you, don't worry, you're still welcome to join us as a Messianic Hebrew. And many such Jews have adopted Noahide Judaism to become Messianic Hebrews throughout history. And some famous names of such people include Johann Kemper, Yechiel Tzvi ben Hirsch, Mark Ley, and the list goes on. There's many. You can pay attention to those and Google them if you want to. So anyone who's involved in preserving our unchanging Hebrew traditions is welcome. You are all welcome to join us. Okay. So that is my introduction for Messianic Noahides. I hope you've got everything you need to know there. There are a few, as I said, doctrinal things you need to be aware of. But with regards to praxis, I think I've outlined it all. You are free to practice as you please, as long as it is in harmony with the doctrines. Now, our doctrine concerning the apocalypse, it's very important, and I didn't realize how important it was when I first started working with Messianic people, with Christians and Muslims. I didn't realize how different their view is from the Judaic view, but the position from Judaism is very simply this. We are in the war of Gog-Magog now. This is the Gog-Magog wartime. We're in it. So that means from the book of Revelation's point of view, everything has passed, everything has happened, everything has been fulfilled, with the exception of the destruction of Gog-Magog's armies. That's the very last chapters of the book of Revelations, the very last chapter of the Apocalypse. Likewise for Muslims too, that's where we are. So If you have not recognized that beforehand, it's time to start trying to see the world with different spiritual eyes, a different set of spiritual goggles, if you like, so that you can start to see how everything has already been fulfilled. And of course, the most difficult thing for Christians to grasp, I think, is the idea that we've already been through the 1,000-year rule, which is supposed to come where the word of God comes down from heaven and rules the nations with an iron rod for 1,000 years before the Gog-Magog war. And Satan is imprisoned for 1,000 years. And the beast is thrown into the lake of fire. And the false prophet is thrown into the lake of fire. And the whore of Babylon, the prostitute, mother of prostitutes, is thrown into the lake of fire. It's difficult for Christians to understand how has all this happened. When it all happened 1,000 years ago, there was no media, there was no television, there was no radios, but it happened, okay? And we have references to it. The beast was the Holy Rome. There was an attempt to take control of Christian faith by the Constantinian dynasty. For a long time, the emperors of Rome and then the Eastern Roman emperors continued, and then later, after the Eastern Roman emperors, even the Western Roman emperors, Charlemagne, continued to try and rule as God's viceroy, as God's representative on earth, as somebody who was above the law, basically a God king. And that was the beast system. That was the beast system, the Holy Rome, the idea that the empire was God's kingdom. That was the beast, and it deceived many people. The false prophet who made everybody worship the beast was the clergy, the patriarchs, God's challengers, if you like. They were the opposite of God's prophets. They were the ones who were promoting worship and respect for earthly authorities rather than heavenly authorities. Jesus of Nazareth specifically said, don't call anybody patera, patriarch, and yet these people were calling their clergy patriarchs and archbishops and metropolitans and popes, and that was a serious problem, and that has also been thrown into the lake of fire. They'll say, hold on a second, all these popes are still around, and the Holy Roman Empire existed for 1,000 years after that. That's true, but the authority of the Holy Roman Empire was destroyed 1,000 years ago when the king was no longer above the law. When the rule of law took over and the king was now subject to the law, that was a massive change. That was the beginning, the very beginning, the birth of something called the rule of law on the planet Earth. And it was the rule specifically of the Evangelion. We are not going to come to a situation again where the Evangelion, the New Testament, rules the world with an iron rod for 1,000 years, as it did from the time of the end of the Carolingian dynasty until the 20th century. That period of time where the Evangelion rules the world with an iron rod and, crushes the enemies of the Evangelion in the winepress of the fury of God's wrath, and the blood flows from them like as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia. That's never going to happen again. That's been and gone. That's finished. That's over. That's done. That period of time where the whole world cowered and shook in their boots at the power and the authority of the New Testament is finished. It's gone. It's over. It's done. It's done its job. Next step is to move forward from there. And it was a dark day. That's the thing which the Christians also didn't notice, is that this day was not a day of brightness for everybody. It was a day of darkness for most people. People didn't notice the light which was shining upon them because the way in which the rule of law was spread around the world was such a horrific process, such a deadly process, that they didn't notice the light that came with it. And the light that came with it was, of course, the rule of law. Gradually, people's lives got better. The kings were no longer above the law. Then the nobles were no longer above the law. Then the juries were set up, and common people, 10 people from amongst the peasantry were allowed to sit on juries and judge their peers. That was a new thing. Equality of the people. They were being raised up. They got to the point where eventually we had a French Revolution where they got rid of the monarchies entirely and the peasantry were able to enjoy civil rights. And then Other people got civil rights in different countries. Then women also got the right to vote, suffragettes, and then, of course, slavery was abolished. And all of this is part of the increase of the rule of law and the equality in the civil rights movement, which is 1,000 years of the rule of the word of God. So that's very difficult for most Christians to accept. And that is doctrinal, and that is absolutely essential for all Messianic Noahides to accept. If you can't accept this, then you cannot be a Messianic Noahide, because you will be deceived by other groups. The scribal Pharisaical approach, it's a bit buried, it's a bit hidden, but it's there. When you dig around, you find it, and the answer is clear. That we have been through that 1,000 years, and now we are in the Gog-Magog war period. So what we see happening around us with all the chaos of people trying to undermine the rule of law, to abolish civil rights, things like that are happening right now. That's because we're in that time where Gog is marching with his armies across the face of the earth, where you see people who are calling themselves Jews in the state of Israel behaving in ways which are completely contrary to Judaism, in fact, causing genocides, for example. This is also because of the spirit of Gog being unleashed upon the planet Earth. So we're all in that period of time right now. And the only way we can defeat Gog is with fire from heaven. And we're always told that every prophecy can have a good fulfillment or a bad fulfillment, depending on how humans treat their responsibility. The good fulfillment would be if humans say, right, okay, well, we're going to spread Messianic Noahide Judaism around the world and convert everybody to make sure that they understand that they shouldn't call themselves Jews when they are not, and only the Pharisaical, scribal Pharisees have the authority to identify who's a Jew and who's not, and everybody else who claims to be a Jew is not a Jew, and they need to be told, you're not Jews, you're just Noahides, and you need to repent, and you need Jesus of Nazareth as your Rebbe. Those ones are the ones that we need to target with this doctrine, with the Messianic Noahide Judaism. If we do so, then we are pouring spiritual fire from heaven upon them, and they will gain a place, a burial place in Israel, means a place in the world to come, if we do it that way. So that's a good fulfillment of the prophecy. Now, if there are not enough people who go around doing this and decide, no, I'm not going to do that, that sounds just like another religion, forget about it, I'm sick and tired of all this process, then the prophecy of the fire from heaven destroying the armies of Gog is going to happen anyway, but it will happen in a very negative way. And those people who are not involved in spreading this doctrine will also be affected by that physical fire. So it can either be spiritual fire poured upon the world and destroying the armies of Gog, which could take another 1,000 years, but still doesn't matter. We can do that. We can destroy that army. It doesn't say how long the army is going to take to destroy the army. It just says that the fire from heaven will come down and destroy them. So we can either start to do that ourselves, or we can allow the literal fire from heaven to come down and destroy the earth, which is also a possibility. So my advice is, let's make it a good fulfillment and do that prophecy ourselves, fulfill that by pouring the holy fire from heaven upon them, rather than shirking our responsibility, avoiding our duties, avoiding our saying, yes, yes, Lord, but then not doing what we're supposed to do. Okay, there's a parable about that. Because if we don't do that, then the fire will literally destroy everybody. There's something drastic is going to happen. And I do believe that is the Apophis asteroid, which is going to come around pretty soon. The Apophis asteroid keeps on changing its trajectory, and the percentage of its probability of hitting the Earth is getting higher and lower, depending on things which are happening to it out there in space. The Apophis asteroid, just so you know, I think it's going to hit us in 2028 or 2029. Let's just get the dates up for that. 13th of April, 2029 is the first flyby. And if we escape that, it will be back again on a second flyby just a few years after that. I think it's 2036. So we've got a chance in 2029 or 2036. If we do well, we can prevent that from happening. If we don't do well, it might be that in 2036, that will be it. There will be a catastrophic fire from heaven come down and destroy all people, and we would have deserved it. Now, I know that that's very difficult for a lot of people to accept, but we have to pay attention to the signs and read the signs that are around us at this time. And so the Apophis asteroid is quite significant. Apophis, of course, was the serpent, symbolized Satan, the devil, in the time. Actually, it's interesting enough. It was the word used for the devil only during the Hebrew sojourn in Egypt. Only when the Hebrews were sojourning in Egypt, that is when Apophis, the devil, the serpent, became noticed in Egyptian religion. And before that and after that, they didn't know about Apophis. So it's as if the Hebrews had brought this knowledge of the serpent to the Egyptians, and they adopted and they gave the name Apophis, or Apep in Hebrew. Apophis is the Greek version of that, Apep. Not sure where the name comes from, but what is significant is that it emerged at the time when the Hebrews were there. So it definitely symbolizes and stands for the devil as believed by those Hebrews at that time. When I say the devil, I mean Satan, the serpent, at that time. So this asteroid is named after that, and I don't think that there's an accident either. I think that it's named that for a particular reason. In Egyptian mythology, of course, in their religion, that Apep was the one who destroys the world, and Ra is the one who fights against the devil to do that. And of course, Ra means the one who sees, and that's exactly the same as El Roi in Judaism, where Hagar is in the desert and she has a vision of Sarhapanim and calls him Rahiel, the God who sees me. And so the God who sees us, this is Sarhapanim. This is what we believe in Messianic Noahides believe is the Sarhapanim, Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua min Nazaret. And so Yeshua min Nazaret is the one who can destroy Apep. That's what the symbolism means if you translate it. And so, of course, that is Satan's rule. So the Apophis asteroid has some kind of symbolic meaning about it. Maybe it'll pass by and we'll be fine. Maybe not. But we haven't got many years to work it out. We've got 4 years before it passes by the first time, and we've got just another 7 years after that. So it could all be over by 2036. This is not a joke. You should go and research this and get some education about this. This is really very, very serious stuff. And so this is exactly where we are, according to the timeline given and interpreted by the rabbis. It is Saadia Gaon who was the one who gave us the dates. And so we know exactly where we are right now. Rashi couldn't understand what Saadia Gaon was referring to with those dates, and he suggested other dates. But in Judaism, we have this rule that a later generation cannot have more insight than an earlier generation. And if the earlier generation's insight is not known by the present generation, it should not be challenged. It should simply be a matter of us being patient to try and work out what that meant. So Rashi is a later generation than Saadia Gaon, who's an earlier generation, and Saadia Gaon has already given us the dates. So we do know that this is what's happening right now. We're in that time right now. Now, I have explained the doctrine. I've put up there in the chat link, an invitation for anybody who wants to join me in the studio to have a chit chat, to push back on anything that I've had to say. And so you're welcome to click on that link and join me in the studio. If you don't, then or consider that you have got nothing really to say except shalom. So we have got a shalom and salam from Israel Kehelavine Sof. Shalom, salam to you too. And we have a shalom, salam from Fakudze, who is saying Shavuot Tov Be'abedan. Thank you so much, Fakudze. Shavuot Tov to you too.